I grew up in the 60s. My mom was pretty much a stay-at-home mom. My dad worked quite a few jobs actually. And there was a couple times when I was growing up that my mom had to go into the hospital. And so dad had to fill in. And dad was very much a partner with my wife. So I mean he wasn't like he'd come home and just
You're,
and do anything. He would do a lot of other stuff and always been like a partner with my mom. But when it came to cooking, it was not his best feature. And the stuff he would make at night for eating wasn't that great. Of course, they had to put up with my eating later on in life, which was not that good either. So we kind of paired off in that. But there was this one time I can remember getting ready for school, and I was just thinking about it. I don't remember if he took off work or what, but mom was in the hospital, so he had to get us ready for school. And he was making us peanut butter jelly sandwiches.
you have any idea how old you were?
Oh, I was pretty young. I was probably,
Elementary school.
yeah, just, probably 8 or 9, maybe somewhere around there, And I happened to come into the kitchen when he's doing it. Took the two pieces of bread and he put peanut butter on one. I was like, oh, that's good. And then he got the jelly out. Well, then he put butter on top. I said, Dad, you don't need to put butter on. It's peanut butter. You know, he didn't understand that. And he said, oh, it's okay. Well, then he opened the jelly jar and put it on top of the peanut butter and didn't put it on the other bread. I was like, Dad, you're not doing it like mom did it.
I'm picturing our oldest son as you're telling this story.
And I don't remember I think he just kind of calmly said, oh, it's okay, and put it back and shoved it in the bag and gave it to us
You
kind of
remember
thing.
I just you've brought this up so many times. Like I know it's a core thing that's irritated you. Like, do you remember like he just said it was okay, and in your mind you were like,
Well, it wasn't like mom, and everything. Mom did good cooking and all that kind of stuff, and
so it
it
was,
just wasn't like
you
mom. So
didn't do it
I
right,
don't think it,
Dad.
I don't, yeah, I think it was because there was a lot of things he didn't do right compared to what mom did, and
A lot of pressure on him to.
yeah, yeah, and he was a really good guy and a good father and all that. It was no, he didn't leave us at high and dry and didn't go off and drink a beer and sit in front of the TV all day or something. But no, I just remember that, and I don't know. I don't
Peanut
think I
butter,
got.
butter, and jelly all in one piece of bread.
Yeah, no, it's just not how you do it, Dad. Ah, well,
Well,
hello, I'm Don.
and this is Gina with Focused Healthy Family. This is podcast number 226. Today we're talking about caregiving and men caregivers, the silent emotional crisis.
So before we get started, I'm gonna give us our tip, and of course, I go back to our.
Hold it.
I know I got a caregiving 101.
I'm Mike Collins.
101 ways to keep caregiving from making you crazy. And today's tip, I thought this was kind of interesting because you and I were talking before this and about my dad and about a lot of things and how I had some regrets from him. And this is number tip 81. It's about regrets. Looking back with regret on what might have been is an exercise in futility. Maybe. The writer George Eliot said, it's never too late to be the person you might have been. If you said or did something in the past that you regret, you still have time to apologize or make amends, even if the apologies are in your prayers. Regrets slow us down and drag us down. Forget regrets and create a new day.
Hmm, a lot to think about.
Yeah, then, like I said, I had a lot when my father passed away. And I think I've done a lot of praying, a lot of talking and to kind of get myself out of it, get
So,
myself
for
away
some
from it.
context, um, if you're joining us for the first time or you don't know our story the way we do, you were 17 years old when your dad
Yeah.
was in the hospital. The way you remember it is being prepped for open heart surgery, but he had a massive heart attack This was in 1976, and he died when you were 17. And I think the beautiful story you told me, um, we were talking about recognizing spiritual presence of our loved ones after they've passed. And you told me you had a dream after he died.
Yeah, well, that because I one of the things, my mom and dad both kind of grew up in during the Depression, and there wasn't they loved us, but it was never necessarily talked about. You
Hmm.
didn't always go around calling "I love you" and all that kind of stuff. Um, but all the things they did were good stuff, and that.
We didn't do that in the 80s and 70s either.
Yeah,
Well,
and my dad was one that I I never was able to say I loved him, and so when I was just about a month or so after he died, I had a dream, and he stood at the end of my bed, and all I could do was go, "Dad, I love you. I really love you. I'm really sorry. I really love you." And he said, "You're okay. Everything's fine." And that was pretty short little um episode, but it was and it's still I still had the regrets. It still took me a time to work through the regrets. And the more I think about it, I've also told the story about that the hospital where I had my surgery and how he was part of that. So I've come a long way in understanding my dad and what I think he's the spiritual guide that kind of guides me along in life. And I think it's good.
a lot to lose a father at the age of 17 when you
Yeah.
had all kinds of teenage angst and were not very happy with your father. And
Well, you have that.
he didn't like that you let your hair grow. This was the
Yeah. Well,
70s
yeah. We used to have to we'd split it down the middle and had it. I would had it down to about here, I think, if I remember right. And
because he used to
he,
cut your hair with a like you cut your hair now, which is really ironic. Um, just trim it real short with a
yeah,
what do you call that clipper?
Clipper, yeah.
Um,
And
and
he just
you went to a hairdresser to get your hair
yeah,
done.
and he's like, I want to say he said something like, that's kind of sissy looking. And yeah. Well, let's before we go too far,
Yeah,
let
you got
got
some
a
good
couple
jokes
of
for
dad
me.
jokes here. So um, let's see. Let me. No, these are yesterday. A clown held the door open for me. I thought it was a nice gesture. Um, my dad used to always say, "The sky's the limit." That's probably why he got fired as an astronaut from NASA. And then my last one is the guy who invented zero. Thanks for nothing.
That's cute. That's a little better than a dad joke. What do our
So,
what do our kids say? Um, Mom jokes or dad jokes, but worse, or something like that.
well, today we're talking about men becoming caregivers, and what the story I told was when dad had to be caregiver for us when mom was away. But
Hmm.
um, just I did a little bit of research on it, and I just want to go over these, and then we'll kind of open it up. But the things that men don't do when it comes to caregiving, they don't identify themselves as caregivers. We like to help people, but we don't want to call ourselves that. They feel pressure to stay young,
Stay strong,
stay strong. Well, young's good too, but I don't
young, strong.
know. Avoid emotional conversations. Focus on fixing instead of feeling. That's a big parent thing itself.
That's a big husband wife thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Listen to my feelings. Don't fix it.
Carrying stress internally and experiencing burnout without recognizing it. That's
And some of those things, carry over with women caregivers as well.
yeah,
I'd like to avoid stereotypes because there's all kinds of people.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's looked at, because the other side of this coin is when men are caregivers, it's like, oh, it's so wonderful that you're doing that. And when
Yeah,
women are doing
yeah.
it, it's just like what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. Well, I had that. I mean, I had some of the nurses with your dad that jumped in and said that, so wonderful you're doing. How are you, I'm just doing what needs to be done, and
They probably, yeah, said that to you far more than me. It was
yeah.
just, this is the really good daughter that helps her father out.
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to like back in the 60s and so men were supposed to be out working and build, giving profiting the company, the family,
Bringing home the
bring home
bacon,
the bacon. There you go. And
being the breadwinner.
so it's changing, but it's kind of a slow change getting to where men are more involved with stuff more.
Well, our society, we still have an elected woman president, still has this underlying um, prejudice, and there's a term for it, but that those stereotypical roles that, we see men and women different. If women portray assertive traits, that someone in a high power leadership position, then they're a B word and they're, versus a man in that same position, like those are valued. And we have different expectations. We just politicians, maybe in general, they're far more judged on their clothing than men are. There's a lot of sexism. So, that still lingers in our society. I tend to be, I mean, my dad was very traditional, and yet I felt like my mom had the last say.
That was the same. My dad
um,
was the same thing. I consider them kind of partners in this.
in fact, I never even realized just some of the slight, sexism and things, because it just felt like part of culture. And I always felt like my parents were a little different than others, which I imagine you felt because your father, even though he was working all those jobs from what you've described to me, made more of an effort and more involved.
Oh yeah,
And then kind of your typical a couple from, they got married in the
my mom
40s. Your parents got married in the
or
40s,
yeah, I was like probably
5 or
44,
46. Well, it was
40.
after the war,
Yeah, so probably 46
six,
probably.
which is, yeah, equivalent to when my grandparents,
But yeah, dad always I always felt like they were partners in this, that in fact mom did most of the checkbook stuff, but they still partnered in it. My dad would go out to look at a car and he'd go at the end he said, "Look, I have to show my wife a week. She has to be this in decision with this." So he'd bring her out to the car because I can remember one time we had a full-size Impala and a Chevelle. And my mom was like, "Oh, I like the big car." And my dad was going for the little one. But
so he
so
bought the big,
yeah,
the
we did.
Impala versus the Chevelle.
Yeah, it wasn't like, you know, I think you told me your dad did a lot of he would go out and buy the car. Did your mom have much say in that? I'm trying to remember.
I have a memory of one of the cars, my mom saying, I want to be the one to pick the car because I don't know if it was my dad bought a car and then he bought a new car and my mom got the old car, or something to that effect. But I have a memory in the probably mid late 80s, maybe I was even in college at that point, would be early 90s, of her wanting to pick out a car. And that was a big deal. So, yeah, I'm sure my mom had a say in cars and colors and things like that
Yeah,
because
yeah.
very outspoken. Um, and
Well, I
so
mean,
those are some simple things, but even other decisions as far as taking care of kids, like you talk about when your mom wasn't there and your dad had to make the sandwiches. I mean, I had a similar experience in the early 80s. My dad was laid off and he was a mechanical engineer working in power plants, and he got laid off like 2 or 3 times. We moved. So, anyways, my mom had to go to work while he was laid off, and my mom was the cook. I mean, my dad grilled outside, but other than that, my mom did the cooking. And like my mom would make stuffed pork chops, and they had this yummy stuffing on top of them, and my dad, I just remember a meal where he made pork chops. He just baked them in the oven. They weren't awful, but they were plain. And we had sweet potatoes from a can, which
ooh,
we never had
ooh, I
like
remember
sweet
those
potatoes
things.
from a can. And I used to think, oh, he did this on purpose so he wouldn't get stuck cooking. We gave him trouble about his cooking.
Yeah,
Um, but I imagine it was very challenging for my dad. I know even talking to my dad later in his life that, that was difficult, being
yeah.
laid off and because my mom did stay home until when we were older, she did some substitute teaching, but it was not by any means the primary breadwinner. He was the one
Yeah. And then
bringing in the bacon.
when you're not, it can be difficult emotionally for people, you know.
You've even struggled with that with
Hmm.
we're actually in part of a book, Breadwinner Wives
Oh
and
yeah.
the Men They Marry.
I forgot about that.
We were interviewed for this book years ago when I went back to work full time after Harrison was born, our oldest, and you were the stay-at-home dad. I
Oh,
still
you talk about that. You talked about that because I was looking at that, like we talked about, is I was a caregiver then, you know, for the kids. There's actually a couple different. I hadn't thought about it. There was a time with the kids, and I remember that was, oh my God, that
the
was a real
time with the
challenge.
kids.
That I was the caregiver for the kids,
Yeah.
but there were also, you know, the other one. I took care of Joyce next door, our neighbor.
Oh yeah, we both
We
did.
both did. I mean, we both did. Yeah,
We
yeah,
bounced back and forth, and because of me working in geriatric
yeah,
care, I'd get overwhelmed by it.
yeah,
And you'd step in. Well, she also looked to a man to help solve things.
yeah, yeah,
She had been abused. She was in an abusive relationship with her husband, and but she kind of looked to the man for solving things and fixing things. She called me when her blood pressure was out of whack, and I'm like, call 911. For one, I'm not even a nurse. I can check it for you and tell you what it is, but
yeah.
um, so yeah, I think about the other funny story. You joined. So this Harrison was born in '97. So I get back to work after a 3 month maternity leave. I was working reduced hours, but still full time hours. You were growing a business. You had no income yet. And you joined an online group, maybe that was stay at home dads.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And was it online? Do you remember?
yeah. Well, it was. Yeah, it
Did
was.
you have any in person meetups? Because
I mean, I've met a couple different dad
this is
groups, but
late
no,
90s,
that
early 2000. I
yeah,
just remember there was drama. Someone slept with someone else's
yeah,
wife,
yeah.
and
It
there
was.
was
It just. I think I got out of
the
that because it
real
was
house
like,
husbands of
what
North
the hell?
Carolina.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like we could
You did.
do a whole show on that one. I think just by itself, you know.
Yeah, it was just kind of funny to tell you. Then you took him to the library for story time, and you met some other moms and joined a play group.
Yeah, yeah.
And you weren't the only dad.
No, there were
There
a couple,
was
and it,
there was another one that was a pilot, and so when he wasn't flying, he'd be there.
yeah.
But you were kind of the dad with these other women, and most of them are kind of a little bit older, like had kids more like in their 30s. Because I remember when I first met them, they didn't know I was so much younger than you. But
And then, like you said, as I went through those times, it was always like, oh, you're like you said, you didn't get it, but I got it, you know, oh, that's so wonderful of you doing that, you know. It's like you know, it was they didn't reap that on you for being the stay-at-home mom, and you did it, you know, you would do it sometime in, you know, when you were off and things like that. They never,
I got the reverse. We'd go down to visit my parents. They lived on Lake Murray, and my dad would always say to us, give your mom a break. And because I worked full time, we went down to the lake. I wanted to spend time with my son. So I just laughed at it. I mean, he was trying to be helpful and he was
yeah,
great grandpa, especially in his younger years when he was able to get down on the floor and play with the kids and things.
uh,
But I just remember being like, no, Dad, I want to spend time with him. He was of the mindset of, because my mom was the one that pretty much raised us. I mean, for a while, he had a travel job. Um, he was there for different things, but there were times when he couldn't be there for things when he was traveling. Um,
well, and then the other time was taking care of your dad. I was a
mm.
caregiver then, and you know, they talk about it here that one of the things, you know, men don't think about the fact that there's times when you have to like wipe somebody's butt, you know, and you do it all the time with your job, and I think
It
women
was
do.
weird the first time that I helped my father, right? As an
Yeah,
occupational
yeah.
therapist working in adult rehab and senior care, helping people in the bathroom, OT stands for on the toilet. That's just part of my job.
On the toilet. I like that.
Yes. And I have a BS in OT. Um, and so I'm used to that, and from being a parent. But your father,
Yeah.
it's always, more comfortable with women versus men, but I, help plenty of older men. But so that was, yeah, obviously weird the first time. But then it got to be, maybe it was because he had dementia and he accepted the help or whatever. But I know, like, if we were visiting him and my sister said he had to go to the bathroom, she'd be like, Gina, like even she wouldn't want to do that role. Um, and I don't know if you have a memory of the first time you helped him in the bathroom. You
One of
did
the
a lot
times,
more once we moved him up close to us, and
yeah, yeah, I didn't. I don't think I did it when he
as
was at home. Well, no, I think I did actually. But I remember one time just hurting him because I just
you
trying to
wiped
wipe
too hard.
him. Yeah, and he was very kind about it.
He's
But
like,
he's like, that really hurts. Stop it, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, sorry. Just and
and
he never refused me or said anything
no.
bad about it. He was very kind with what he did. But
And I mean, you talked about you felt like he was a bit of a father figure to you because you didn't have your dad. I never had a father-in-law.
yeah,
He came when we bought, well, our first house we bought together and did trim work for us, did things around the house, helped us out. I know helped showed you with laying up drywall and
oh, yeah, I remember it because at the house we decided to tear up the kitchen, and I had to tear all the.
oh,
We couldn't get the. We tried to get the wallpaper off, but it wouldn't come off.
the Cumberland house. It was paneling. It was built in '69. They had put paneling everywhere, but the people had somebody who had lived there before us had put wallpaper on the paneling, but they hadn't primed it. And we were going to just remove the wallpaper and paint the paneling.
But
Well, there was no
so
removing the
I
wallpaper.
removed
So we decided,
all that.
and there was no wallboard behind the paneling. So you decided you were going to put the wallboard up.
Yeah, and your dad, I luckily before I was going to do it, I called him up, and I don't know what I was talking about, but I would have never figured out you're supposed to split a 2x4 in half, so part of the each of those fall on that. I wouldn't have, and I would have gotten to the end of it, and then be very lost. So that helped me. But
Is that
so
the
yeah,
first time you put wallboard up? Because I know you in the first house that you bought, you redid the laundry room area.
um, I had somebody do that.
You
I
had
was
someone do that for you.
the people that did the siding filled in some of that. I just had to do other stuff. But yeah, so
So having
anyway,
so having his help and having him be like a father figure, I know you used to tell me that you didn't mind being there to help him out.
yeah,
Um,
get down his little tool, his little and not it was a big his tool not tool room, but his
Workshop.
workshop, and helping him out, and he'd always tell stories and stuff like that, and uh,
Yes, my dad was definitely a storyteller. So thinking about other ways men are caregivers, I think about one thing on here is a son having to deal with medications for his parent while trying to work. And I think of, I work at an independent living facility. And so it's not a healthcare facility. So they either have to pay for caregivers or family members help them for people who need help managing medicine. And some people do it with no problem. There's people who struggle. I can think of one particular son who he works a lot and if he travels he doesn't come often and he took the pills away from her and he was holding on to them and we don't always know why and it was difficult to help her wanting to manage her medicine and dealing with the son and sometimes it can be a kind of a different experience than a daughter and you see that a lot. I've talked to family members of people I've worked with in short-term rehab, and I can remember one woman. She had like siblings, but she's kind of like she just accepted that she was, well, my brother has other things he has to do, and she said it so matter-of-factly, like it was no big deal, like she was the one to take care of things because and she didn't ask for help, and it was just assumed. And then women do outlive men, and so it's less often where I see the man caring for the woman, but it happens. The woman has dementia, the woman has Parkinson's, the woman has a stroke, and then the husband's in that role of caregiver. And
well, we see that right now with Jim at
we don't
where
need to name
it is
people.
true. I didn't mention his last name,
We
but
know some people, yeah,
yeah.
that are in that role, and it can look different, but it is. That's the crisis. Men are, in this position. I think people in general are living longer. People are surviving traumatic things.
Hmm.
and just the dementia prevalence is higher as we're living longer. That you see different degrees of that, and yet when you see a man who's just so there for his wife, you do kind of like, oh, isn't that wonderful? There's like an added amount of
Mm.
specialness, because it's less common, especially in the elderly, because women do still outlive men. I don't know the statistic off the top of my head. So yeah, men are more often in that role, or sometimes that people only have a son. They could have an unmarried son, or the daughter-in-law is not helpful, or the relationship is
Well,
challenged, and it can look very different. I worked with someone, and like the sons didn't really see eye to eye, and they didn't communicate with each other very well. And like, the one handled finances and the other one handled other things, but they were very uninvolved. And, I see all different arrays of this situation. I mean, for men, what else is on here, Don, as far as
well, there's a lot. I mean, because it is the man handling it, the husband handling it, you lose the. They talk about losing the relationship,
mm,
because now you're not really the husband, you're the caregiver, so that changes in it. Um, And like I said, I've got somebody that came to my last talk, and he was a man taking care of his wife. And of course, the pressure, of course, and that's what I work with a lot, is helping people get past the pressure of it, of how he has. And he had that I've praised him for coming to the workshop, because when you walk away from somebody, you got to make sure there's somebody there, because she was beyond, she needed somebody there. There was,
24/7, she needed constant supervision.
yeah, and so
He had
he
to
needed to
find
find
someone.
somebody.
So there's one thing, asking for help, which is
Yeah.
hard for a lot of people to do, but for a man to ask for help, men feel like they should just take care of it. I mean, as sort of a typical response. Do you
Like I said at the beginning, they wanted. I first said wanted to be young, but they wanted to be. They think they should be strong with
right,
this.
not show any
Yeah,
emotions?
and not afraid to ask. Uh, you know, and that's got it. That has to change. And I think some people run into it later in their caregiving time, that they have to be able to still ask.
Well, and it's how we're raised.
Yeah.
Um, you know, we're still raised in a society where, men have different expectations of them than women. And there's been a lot of push and a lot of advances. And, obviously women can now vote, and there are, many changes that have happened. And yet that still lingers. And it's kind of more the exception, to have a balanced couple and relationship. And maybe people have it with their kids. Yeah. But then what about when it's your parents that are involved, right? And this issue lingers because of the way we're raised. And, men are raised, don't cry, don't be a sissy,
Yeah.
take care of it, get things done. We talked about wanting to fix things. I remember early in our relationship, and I was sharing problems with me, and I'd be like, just listen, I don't need you to fix it. And, that helplessness feeling of wanting to fix it and not knowing what to do, and feeling like that's your role to fix things. And when someone's, you're dealing with care, especially an elderly person, and either it's dementia or a progressive illness, or, elderly means kind of the end of your life, right? So things
Yeah.
aren't typically going to get a whole lot better. I mean, you could have an illness that you recover from, but it's not, it's only typically going to involve more support and care needed. And so that feeling of not being able to fix it. I don't know if you can speak on that, or having that, how it,
How
you as a man, um,
Yes, I am a man.
as you like caring for my dad, and just, I mean, by the time he moved up here, we had been through it a lot. I had been the daughter
Yeah.
that jumped in a heartbeat, whether they lived 40 minutes away or even after we moved and it was an hour and whatever, to go down there when he was in the hospital, and to be there to support my mom, help him. And as my mom got older, I really felt like I needed to be there.
Well, they talk about one of the lines in here. That's what I was looking for. Is it? I'll mention, man quietly grieves while managing responsibility. You know, we're too afraid to let it out, and too busy sometimes to let it out. And so we grieve internally, which then can build up, you
Mhm.
know. Um, with with your dad, I felt pretty good about it because I felt like we gave a lot of time to him. I didn't think it was overbearing. I thought it was we gave the kind of time because he gave us a lot of through his life,
Yeah, we
gave
had,
us a lot of time,
and he had a very emotional side to him. Even though, yeah, he was kind of the man of the house and it's my money kind of mindset. At the same time, um,
Well, we I don't think we ever really had to question if we asked him for something, he would money,
oh,
and
so we
anything
had a
kind.
good relationship going
Yeah.
into things, and
And that makes a big difference. I can
oh
imagine
yeah,
if I was angry at somebody or, that would be because there's a lot of people that have to take on that responsibility, but
the
they're
the
fighting it.
relationship, yeah, it was a struggle beforehand. I had the first grandchildren for my parents, and they had bought property. It was about 2 hours from where we lived at the time, and as soon as I was pregnant, they're like started building the house down there. So within a year, they were living 2 hours from us. Um, they had been in Pennsylvania before they moved to South Carolina, and then they moved when they had to leave that house. They realized it was too much upkeep. They came closer to us. And so we always had that kind of relationship. And because we shared responsibility of raising our kids with both of us working kind of part time, we both, you know, were involved with my parents,
Hmm.
and we're both, kind of built that relationship. And it was partly because we co-parented and we co-educated our kids, and we had that dynamic, which I'm sure is not a typical
Yeah, I
dynamic.
mean, there was no question in my mind that if you couldn't do it, I would do it. You know, because I can remember quite a few times when he was here that one of us had to run down and you had to go to work or you had
Yeah, once we moved him very close to us those last months of his life, and um,
we'd run down,
so it would pretty much one of us until because my mom hadn't moved up yet. We got my dad settled, and she was getting the house ready to sell, and downsizing her 3-4,000 square foot home to move into an apartment. And so, yeah, one of us was there pretty much. And it was great that you were able to step into, because I remember I had one day you came after me and I'm like, I'm done. He's yours. Like, I just was burnt out, and he was having a mood or whatever. And I just got frustrated. And it was great to have your relief there to help out. And my brother, too,
Yeah.
living 600 miles away. I remember he was very involved and did what he could from a distance. He later stepped in helping with finances for my mom because that's something you didn't need to be he could do from a distance, and it was a strength. I remember him telling me, if you need me to come there, you had decided to go to St. Louis to visit your family, and you took our older daughter with you, and there was
Oh
like
yeah.
that gathering, and the two of you went, and it was like the day you're driving out there, my dad winds up in the hospital. He lived in the assisted living, the memory care unit from June till he passed in October. And I think he went to the hospital 5 times in there. So he's in the hospital. At the time I have 15, 16-year old, helping her and supporting her, and working part time and juggling this. And I remember my brother saying, if it gets really bad, let me know. I'll come down. He luckily had flexibility with his job to do that. And I remember going, you know what? I think it's really bad. And he flew down, and he came down a lot,
Yeah.
the last year and months even, and was great that he could step in and help out. And I know it was more difficult for him. I was used to seeing people with Parkinson's and people with dementia, and it still was very tough to see my dad with it. But I
Mhm.
had also been around seeing the progression slowly, whereas my brother living further away, I mean, we still saw him at least twice a year, but it was just emotionally a lot difficult for him. I know it was a very much, we've talked about just a different experience for him and
Mhm.
coming to terms with that and just his own, we had good relationships with our parents, but they weren't perfect by any means, right? We all have different
No.
baggage and struggles and, things that we hold on to, grudges and things with parents and how they raised us. And now we're supporting them and some of those things. So I know it was a different experience for him helping out.
Well, one of the questions they ask here is, what would support for male caregivers look like?
Mm.
Hmm. One, I think, would be to assure them or to, I don't know, give them some kind of confidence in that it's going to be okay and that they can, they can let go of some of the emotions of it.
It's
And
easy to say that,
yeah, I
but
know.
it's not always easy to do that. When you asked that question, my first thought was giving support to anybody,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
especially someone who's not good at asking for it. It could look like, here's some different things I could do to help you out.
Hmm.
Let me know. And then for some people, it's like, you know what? I'd like to help you in this area. Please let me do this. You want to be careful with anybody to not step on toes and feel like, especially if they want to stay in control, that this person is taking
Yeah,
over. So that's we're asking, what could I do to help? It's like raising kids. People want to come and help take care of the baby. It's like, no, the mom wants to be with the baby. Take care of the other things in the house. You can
yeah,
do that same thing. Maybe he really feels guilty, whatever, that he wants to, be the one there with his spouse. And you're like, let me help. Let me give you some relief. Well, how about I pick up some groceries for you? How about,
yeah.
or how about I just sit with her for a little bit, and just growing that confidence. Because sometimes you just have to do to let them see you're supportive, like show up at the same time or once a week. And
Hmm.
even if they don't leave, then maybe they feel confident that you can leave. Because sometimes having that touchy feely conversation might feel awkward to them. I'm fine. I'll take care of it. Yeah, no. But saying, hey, bringing a meal over, just showing up,
Yeah,
just being there in the quiet silence, that can be difficult for a lot of people to just be there and be quiet. I mean, we
yeah.
did that for my dad a lot in the end. It was just sitting quietly with him. And you can do that for someone who's caregiving for somebody, someone who doesn't want to
Yeah.
talk about their feelings. And we have to realize people process feelings differently and people need different things.
Hmm.
And to accept that and not be like, you have to share your feelings. You need to open up. Why are you so stubborn? That doesn't help anything.
No.
Allowing people to grieve in different ways and to process and figuring out what is helpful to them and what can be supportive. And so maybe it's talking to other male family members or other people who know, whether this is your father or, whoever that's in this situation, to understand them better, to be able to help them. Because what helps them may not be what helps you.
Well, yeah, and because they talk about, why do caregivers' emotions go unnoticed a lot of times? And so I think part of that too is being able to see it yourself and then ask the questions of how you might be able to help.
Right. And I mean, women do this as well, as far as stuffing emotions, hiding feelings. Um,
Well, caregivers too, if you think about those at work, they have to stuff them down sometimes because they're having to do multiple, you know,
well, as a professional, when it's not your family member, yeah, like people say things that hurt my feelings, and or if I say things offensive, and I have to let it go. I'm in a role of being a therapist for someone, and especially working in a building where people live and where our therapy company works out of the building. So we built more of a relationship with these people that live there, because then they go off therapy, but we still have interactions with them. Yet there's still that level of professional, I'm the professional and you're my client kind of thing, that we have to let go of some things, not take things personally. We have to, yeah.
Well, on the other side of it, though, the people that are sporting is trying to be able to handle a little bit better with, and it's not always when when you're angry about whatever's going on with the person you're the father-in-law, whoever you're dealing with, and you're angry at what's going on with them, is try not to take it out on the nursing people because they're going 90 miles to 100 miles an hour trying to get everything done. Try to be a little more gentle. You can state the facts of what's going on if you see something that.
So you're talking about like my dad was in assisted living and memory care unit, and we were helping out, and we'd get frustrated with how the
Mhm.
caregivers were doing things, and recognizing that they're doing the best they can with the knowledge they have.
Yeah,
In those kind of settings, the people who spend the most time with the patients have the least amount of education and experience in that area. And, finding ways to help them understand and
yeah.
engaging with them instead of just being pissed off and angry about it. And it's challenging because, yeah, when you're dealing with something, um,
Well,
it's a challenge. And yet, um,
I just remember, and I'm not sure. Different people I've heard they complain about the people in the building, and there are some that probably need you
another
know
job.
another job. Yeah, but overall, it's better, like you say, to be able to go in there and give some ideas of some things that might go on, or ask questions or things like that, instead of just beating them up or just walking away going, oh, that's a terrible play. I don't know. I just
Letting them know how, yeah. I know when we sat at my dad's room, I wanted to label the clothing and where it was at. And even though my dad was not likely to be getting up, getting his own clothes out, I'm like, this will help caregivers put things away. And like we had music for him at night, and I had to, tell them to put signs up about him playing the music. And I remember somewhere he was, I put a sign up, and the people that work there did not realize that the sign was intended for them. So sometimes talking to them about, if he's
yeah
anxious, this is what you can do. You can put this music, or just every night, can you put the music on? And that's when we had private caregivers. It was a little more helpful, versus when you live in a facility. And
yeah
the ratio where my dad was pretty nice, but you often have, one caregiver has to take care of 8, 10, 15 people. And so the time they have is limited. But, incorporating a routine, you come and you help them get ready for bed, just adding, this little thing, and having signs as reminders can be helpful. I remember my dad went one of the trips to the hospital. He went to short-term rehab for a little bit. And I went in there and I put up a sign with all this stuff about Parkinson's, and I got told this is a violation of his privacy, and we can't have all this up here. And I'm aware, someone who works in that setting, that there are, but I'm like, I knew as a professional I couldn't reveal this private health information, but I'm like, I'm the family member. There was, as a responsible person for my dad, why can't I put the signs up? And they're telling me those signs, that they were a violation of his privacy, and they're worried about the state who regulates things and comes in and inspects. And
yeah. I wonder
um,
wonder if you wouldn't have been the OT if you would have if you were just the mom or the husband or whatever came in, but you'd still be able to put that up.
no, I did it as I didn't do it
Yeah,
as a therapist there. I did it as his daughter, and got told I couldn't have that up there. And I would hope that they would have said that to anyone, and that they weren't looking at me different because I was a
yeah,
therapist.
yeah. I wonder.
But that's the crazy thing about state regulations, is they are so ridiculous like that. It's like I tried to get my dad a bed rail, and there's regulations that say it's a restraint. Like we used to restrain people, and then they decided, oh, that's not good. We can't do that anymore. So they put these heavy restrictions in place for a while. Then people just started medicating people before they were like, that's a restraint too. That's still an issue.
Yeah, yeah,
But then they made everything a restraint, from a just a half bed rail that can help someone stand up from the bed. It can even be helpful someone not falling out of bed. And they're like, no, we're a no bed rail facility. And I'm like, he needs this bed rail here. And it was such an ordeal because they were
Hmm.
like, this is the one kind that's allowed. And it was very frustrating to me. But so when he went to rehab, I'm like, because I saw him in the hospital. I knew him and I knew his Parkinson's. And you go to help him stand up, but if you didn't explain what you're doing and give him time, he would tighten up and he would resist and he would lean back. And I remember they called him a total lift when he got there. And it's like, that's interesting. And I know therapy is better at doing, we're more skilled and trained in that kind of thing than even nursing staff in general. So, they go in and they assess and they say, for right now, we need two people to help this person, even though when therapy does it, could be less. Um, but I knew what my dad needed. Once he got upright on his feet, he's able to keep his balance pretty well. And I watched other people transfer him and stuff, and I just cringed because, and so I, and so I put signs up because, and they told me certain things I could keep, but a lot of it had to come down. But I was very frustrated because I'm like, okay, I know that you guys can't put this up, but I'm putting this up because I want him to get the best care, and people need to understand.
Yeah.
I think that might have been where they didn't realize one of the notes I put up was for them that um, um, anyways, going way off topic here,
No,
talking about
it's
but supporting other people and just the different things that come into play. There was one question on this information you pulled up that how do you parent the person who raised you?
we've talked about that for a long time
And
too.
so whether you're the daughter or the son, this is a challenge. And I get people who are very stern. It doesn't matter that I'm 90 and I have this, health problem. I am still the parent here, and you can't talk to me that way. And then I get other people who are kind of like, yeah, they treat me like I'm the kid now, and they're kind of sarcastic or indifferent about it. And other people who accept it. Well, and I can only imagine, for sons looking after either a mom or a dad, just the position that puts them in.
Well, it goes back to a client that I had some years ago, and she was 81, I think, when she came to me, but she had been down in Florida, divorced her husband down in Florida, who was he was a bit of a scum anyway, and was moving back up to here to Charlotte because her kids were here, and she thought automatically that the kids would be all
They
supportive
were
and
grown with children, right?
yeah.
And
But as we talked over it, she was a very much, I call it kind of a military kind of wife, and that where she was very stern, didn't allow him to do anything. Everything was very controlled. And now she's expecting these children to just go, "Oh yeah, come on in, mom," and it took a lot to work with her to get her to, you know, because a lot, some of the things that she would say to them was just, you know,
and she didn't
and
realize the full impact it had on
yeah,
them and that they held on to that and they didn't want to just, reconnect with mom now that
yeah,
she's retired and has time for us. And
yeah. So we've got to work on that. We got her into a better place with her kids, where she would work with them and didn't cuss them out and things like that, which
it took a lot of work on her
yeah,
part to
yeah.
Um,
So
just want to touch on different caregiving styles between men and women. So just to kind of, and again, this could apply to different people, right? Women could have these styles, but women may lead toward emotional caregiving, may more focus on task-oriented caregiving, and that can go either way. There are women out there who are much better at task-oriented things. Um, Men often organize systems, schedules, finances, doing logistics. Women may notice the emotional details first. And, talking about neither is right. It's just different ways of handling
mhm.
it. Um, Male caregivers could get misunderstood. You could see the way they're doing it and saying, why, you should open up. You should talk about your feelings, telling them you need to be more like a woman, you need to handle this different versus finding their strengths and supporting someone. Um, Talking about burnout, and this happens either way, ignoring their own health stop exercising, eat poorly, losing friendships. And I imagine it can be a little more silent for men, especially someone kind of in that traditional male role, doesn't want to share and talk about their feelings. So it's even more isolating if you're in that position and caring for someone, and you just feel like you need to do this and take care of this. Um,
Well, I see it a lot in the practice I work with. I get these anywhere from 60 to 80 years old people that have gone through that with their, and it's finally showing up physically because they've hold a lot of times holding their emotions in, and they say it ends up being a physical issue that they're
and it
having to fight.
does. I mean, it manifests. I give you trouble, Don. Don's of German descent, pretty much all German descent, right? And I'm mostly of Italian descent. And there's a lot of heart disease in Don's family. And I talk about that they stuff it
Yeah.
in, and the stoic Germans, and they don't share their feelings. And Italians, at least in my family, are very expressive, and we're spilling our emotions out all over the place. But interestingly, there's really not much heart disease.
Yeah.
In fact, well, my one uncle, but that was my dad's side, that's only half Italian, that had a heart attack. But that's stuffing that feelings, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, we can all do it in different ways, but if it doesn't go out, it stays in. And
Hmm.
I mean, we could talk a whole lot about that. It'd be fun to have someone on to discuss that further. But just when we store things inside, it does create dis-ease in our body. And it's like tapping. I remember probably Jan talking about, if you see something stressful and what's the first thing you do? You kind of put your hand on your heart and you're just like, oh my, right? And that's a
Yeah.
tapping point right there, or you do this with your head, tapping points. And so they're kind of normal reactions to things. And so just kind of managing that stress,
I mean,
because
it
it is
goes,
so important. We don't realize. And as you're caring for, whether it's your spouse or whatever, it's usually gradual and slowly, or it could be suddenly, and you just have to jump in and do things, and you don't realize, what's happening. You don't realize you're getting burnt out. You don't realize, oh, I'm not exercising anymore. You think, oh, it's just for right now, and
it drags on sometimes.
right.
Yeah. Well,
I think we've covered quite a bit of information in this topic. Um, we thank you for joining us today. There it is. Thank you for joining us today on our Focused Healthy Family podcast. If today's conversation sparked an interest in you, please let us know if there's further information you'd like us to dig into. We're always reaching out, finding people to interview and discuss different areas of topics and conversation. Please also take note to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with someone who might be of interest to you. Feel free to look back on the many different areas of podcasts that today we talked about a lot of things that we've discussed in other podcasts, and you can search that within our podcast. If stress, panic, overwhelm are part of your daily routine, are you a caregiver, man or woman, having to care for whether it's children, spouse, parents, anybody? You're going to want to look at Don's EFT Discovery Series. EFT tapping can be described as weird, but when people get involved in doing it, they're like, wow, this really works. So learn more about what EFT can do for you and supporting yourself and caring for others. For wellness tips, caregiving resources, and more episodes, visit focusedhealthyfamily.com or focusedhealthyfamilypodcast.com. You can connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Focused Healthy Family. Instagram is Focused Healthy Family 1. And again, you can listen to these podcasts wherever you listen to podcasts, but you can also listen and or watch YouTube at Focused Healthy Family. New episodes are aired every Thursday. We air these weekly. We've been doing this for, I think, over 3 years. And know that Don is available to speak to organizations, caregiver groups, healthcare teams, and community groups about practical ways to reduce stress and build resilience in caregiving environments. For information about booking Don to speak at your location, please reach out to schedule a presentation or a workshop. And remember, how you speak to your children and your loved ones today shapes their future and yours.